macroscopic level, they exist to kill. They travel, they attack, they hide, they even gather together in defense maneuvers. Pathogens are the enemies of every member of the healthcare team. On Pathogens and PPE, we give you the tools you need to fight these threats and win. So sit back, tune in, and let's make these microbes tremble at the sound of your name.
Hello and welcome back to the Pathogens and PPE podcast. I am your host, Jill Holdsworth, and I am here with my co-host, Mark Copeland, and we'll be talking about everything sterile storage and clean storage today. Hang in there and don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a message from our sponsors. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Pathogens and PPE Season 2. I'm Jill Holdsworth, and I'm an infection preventionist from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Copeland, who I am so excited to have with me today. He has the best radio voice of anyone out there right now on LinkedIn space. Mark, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for inviting me, and I hope anything I say matches apparently my voice. That's really nice. I didn't know it. Jill, it's been great. We have talked, and we've been running in the same circles for years, and it's really nice to be able to do something like this with you, with really smart people in this room with us, this virtual room, if you will. So thank you.
Yeah, this is really cool. So why don't you take just a second for somebody who may not know you yet, just give them a little bit of background about who you are.
Sure. I've been a medical device salesperson for 20 years. I started as a spine rep, so I was one of the many annoying people who brought in trays that weighed 800 pounds and brought them in at 5 o'clock for cases the next day to sterile processing. And I quickly learned to make a lot of friends in sterile processing. So I have been involved with selling a product. Many of you guys know it. For about 10 years, we were one of the early sales teams for one tray sterilization containers, and many years ago. And that's where I learned an appreciation for how complicated sterile processing is. And we don't do that anymore, but I've just maintained a big advocacy and a lot of friendships in sterile processing because first of all, I like the people. I'm fascinated by the departments. And I think they're the key to unlocking a high performance operating room in the next decade. And I think I think the more we all talk about it, the more the departments will get the funding, the staffing, the instrument, whatever it is that they need. And I'm noisy, and I've been in about 400 different sterile processing departments now. And I just feel advocating for these folks means a lot to me, frankly. So I still sell into hospitals and health systems and ASCs, but I have a special spot in my heart for sterile processing. So hopefully that helps.
All of that's why you're the perfect co-host for this episode today. We have 3 amazing guests today to talk all about sterile and clean storage, and I'm going to ask each of them to do the same, and I'm going to start with Miss Tiffany Reece.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Reece. I've been a sterile processing professional for a little over 6 years now. I've done a variety of roles, both full-time and travel. I also do some extracurriculars outside of the department work that I do. So I'm a part of the Beyond Clean Advisory Group. I'm in AMI working groups, and I'm a member of KIP-ED, Kilmer Innovations in Packaging. It's our education committee.
All right, awesome. Thanks for being here, Tiffany. And we'll move right along to Kendall.
Hi, my name is Kendall Ashe. I'm the Vice President General Manager with CS Medical. CS Medical makes all sorts of automated cleaning, disinfecting devices for ultrasound probes, along with providing solutions for the complete reprocessing from pre-cleaning, storage, leakage testing, transport, everything you need to properly reprocess an ultrasound probe. And then I've been in this medical device space now for about 15 years.
Great. Thanks so much for being here. And last but not least, Miss Malinda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Malinda Elammari. I'm a educator, auditor, and presenter from North Carolina. I have been in the industry for over 24 years now, a very long time. And again, part of Amy, part of KIP, Go Kipsters, and just very, very involved in the packaging industry. So, AKA Packaging Princess here, reporting for duty. So, I'm super happy to be here.
We are lucky to have you. All right. Thanks, guys, so much for being here today. And we're going to dive right into everything storage related. So as we get started, let's just open up with common issues that we find in sterile and clean storage. And Malinda, I'll just come right back to you. What are some of the common issues, barriers, or just deficiencies that you find when you've been rounding or auditing in sterile storage or clean storage areas?
How much time do we have for this? Okay. So I will say there's some major ones right now. I think the biggest one that we're seeing, and this is a trend that is happening throughout multiple facilities throughout the United States, is hanging peel pouches. People are getting very creative with space. And again, I always say this, sterile processing, we are creative people. And in this case, this is not necessarily a good thing. So, hanging pouches is a huge issue I see. I see dust in bins. If you're in a facility that has great bins and people are like, really cautious of that and they're putting stuff into bins, nobody's cleaning those bins. And so then you get dust bunnies stuck to pouches. I would say stacking of wrap trays. I get where, again, it's a space situation. We're all stuck with space, but we have to be cognizant of that stacking and what happens, the holes and stuff that comes from that. And I think from a rigid container perspective, I will say a lot of times I find, filters missing, locks are missing on trays that are considered sterile. Or one of my favorites is like when the lid doesn't fit at all and it's like kind of got a nice big gap in the seal. And then the last thing I would say too is rigid containers. When I look at storage, I see, let's just say, for instance, an Askelapp container with a Jarrett bottom or Integra bottom, like not paying attention to those kind of things. So.
Can I comment? All of a sudden, as usual, when I talk to people who do this and live this every single day, I learn like 3 new things. Could you explain to me hanging the peel pouch? Because I've not noticed it, but I also haven't been looking for it. You're saying they're hanging it from something, clipping it, Malinda? What is it that you're seeing that they're not supposed to be doing?
You name it, we're seeing it, Mark. Yes. So either using clips, kind of like those little bag clips that people use, they'll clip the pouch.
Like for chips?
More so like, the claw clips that are kind of on like
a binder clip?
They attach to like EKG cords and stuff to clip them to beds and stuff like that. That's what that reminds me of, like the metal jaw clips. So they're using those. Some places are using, the sticky loops that you see in like retail stores to hang stuff. They stick them to the back of that. Other places are using folds and clipping it there. Some places are punching holes in them and hanging them that way. And so I have seen so many different varieties of things that people are doing.
You are right. This is creative. I guess that's the word. And I suppose they're out of the box thinking, but there's a line you draw when you're out of the box thinking to being compliant and safe. That's new to me too. I hope if you're listening to this and you've got hanging peel pouches somewhere that you go and take them down. Now, we don't hang like on a clothesline our peel pouches. They should be stored a very specific way. Okay, that's a great way to open up this episode. Thanks, Malinda.
I can go on and on about that one, trust me.
All right, I'm going to move to Tiffany now. I know you've been doing a lot of auditing recently. What kinds of things are you seeing?
I think a lot of it is what Malinda has said, is The issue is space. And so I think a lot of sterile processings have that stereotypical wire rack that you can change the levels of each shelf. And I see a lot of people talk about how they don't have enough space and that's why they have to stack, 2+ high. I think a lot can be done in terms of playing Tetris with your storage, getting extra shelves. An additional shelf is less expensive than a whole pre-configured rack. So it's a lot of space finding places to put things where they don't necessarily belong. They end up on carts with equipment. They end up on side tables, those sorts of things. So it's really just reconfiguring the space that you have to make it more functional for your department.
Can I piggyback off of what Tiffany just said with the shelving too? One of the things that, I agree with reconfiguring your shelves, right? Adding another shelf so that your trays are just one level is a great idea. The other thing I want to say is just pay attention to your shelving with the width of your shelf versus the width of the item you're storing it on. So if I have a shelf that is only 6 inches and my tray is 8 inches, that means, 2 inches are hanging off of that shelf. So what we're going to start seeing is pressure holes in those wrap trays and stuff. And then people are like, oh, why do we have holes in our items? And so that could be one of the root cause that's causing it. So, and the same thing would go for transport carts, like when we're taking trays off of there, what are we putting them on to transport them? Are those carts wide enough for what we're transporting?
Mark, I'm going to throw a question over to you. Something Tiffany said kind of reminded me of this, and you alluded to it earlier. Why do we see so many vendor trays overweight?
I don't mean it in a negative way, but it's to an extent, it's ignorance on the company's part. I think most of the time, the people that are validating these things, designing these trays, in my experience, are product managers who don't know sterile processing, have never stepped foot in it, don't understand the rules, and they have the rules have improved over the years, right? So I remember when rules came out and said, hey, it can't be more than 25 pounds, which I think was actually an OSHA regulation, not to mention how difficult to sterilize. And I remember getting a 3-level tray for an anterior lumbar, and I walked it in and it was already 27 pounds, right? It hadn't even been containerized or wrapped or extra instruments added. And I just think there's a massive gap in knowledge. And I don't think it's a negative. They're actually saying, hey, we're trying to cut down the trays. And you're like, yeah, but it's 3 levels and it weighs 40 pounds. So I really chalk it up to that. I don't think it's intentional. I just think it's complete lack of knowledge, frankly. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think, Jill? Is that what you expect, or is that what where do you guys come from at this?
In my experience, when I've approached some of the vendors and I'll say, this tray is overweight, some of them are like, oh yeah, that's a dump tray, or they have some sort of excuse that it's like, well, my bad. It's just a tray of junk, or oops. It's almost like they just kind of hoped it would slide by. But I feel like to some extent it is education, but to some extent it's like, oh, hopefully nobody's actually checking the weight. But then you've got some IPs that go through with the scale and start weighing anything that has the vendor name on it that they know could possibly be overweight. So for IPs that are listening, you should definitely be weighing. Well, really, SPD folks too. Everybody should be weighing trays, but it's definitely a good quality audit to do often, because I don't know that the vendors are doing it themselves. And if they do, I'm not sure that they're doing anything about it, because that requires extra work. I'm going to throw a question over to Kendall now. Let's switch over to probe storage. What are we seeing that's going wrong in terms of probe storage and TEE storage?
So when I'm seeing the different facilities and how different people are storing probes, is they're not often taking into account that some probes are fully high-level disinfected, some probes are only high-level disinfected in one part and low-level disinfected in the other part. A lot of times people look at a T-probe, look at an endoscope, they think, okay, we're just going to treat everything the same. We can coil it up tight, we can hang it certain ways. But really, you have to look at how the probes are used, how they're being, disinfected to make sure you store them correctly. Endoscopes, the entire part is being high level disinfected, so they can all touch each other fine while they're being stored. Unlike with a T probe, only the end part or the shaft of the T probe is being high level disinfected. The handle, the cabling, that can only be low level disinfected. So you want to make sure that when you're storing them, those pieces aren't touching each other and you're not having cross contamination in your storage environment. So that's the biggest issue that I think I see people doing.
How does a sterile processing team, I mean, they have to follow the instructions for use, but how do they know? Does that, again, I am unaware of that space. I've never sold anything or done procedures like that. How do you have posters? Like, do you have charts? That seems like simple things you just described, but I know they're not. Kendall, what do you guys do to make sure people understand this?
Well, it's a lot of education. It's a lot of working with the probe manufacturers even to make sure their directions are available. Because at the end of the day, the customers come to us often with questions, but it's also clear labeling and directions and training. There's a lot of people that just want to treat all probes the same when there's vast differences between them. So it's a lot of just awareness and training.
I'm telling you, Jill, every time I get on these, I'm telling you, like, I had no idea when I got into this business. And every day I talk to somebody, and it's happened 3 times already here. I'm like, okay, had no idea handle could be low level disinfected, and and the scope itself or the operating, I guess, could be high level, and you have to keep them separate. And as soon as Kendall says it, I'm like, well, yeah, that makes total sense, but I would have never known that. I just think what people talking about this stuff helps. Every single day, everybody gets incrementally smarter because I'm trying to keep up.
I think we all have to think that way. We're all continual learners because we have to be. And if we're not, we're in the wrong field.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, a question I do have for you, Kendall, because I have seen it multiple times with TE probes, with vaginal probes. People like to store things in plastic tubes, and they like to do that because they don't want to spring for a cabinet. I've seen the plastic tubes in the same room as the equipment they're high level disinfecting with. I've seen them in the ORs themselves. So what are your thoughts about those plastic tubes?
Those plastic tubes are just, you're just asking for an HAI or a healthcare acquired infection, I think, with those plastic tubes. They're be incredibly hard to clean or keep clean. You're not going to be able to get down there. People, you can't reach your arm down there and wipe them down regularly. So they're going to build up stuff possibly. Yeah. Unlike a cabinet, which is going to have a HEPA filter, pre-filter, if it's a good cabinet, it'll be bathing that T probe or transvaginal probe or endoscope with HEPA clean air to keep it in a good state, so it's safe to use on the next patient. Whereas the tubes, they're just going to accumulate stuff and they're going to bang against it and they're going to have stuff on them, and then that stuff is going to go into a patient and cause an HIV.
Yeah, to Kendall's point, I often wonder, like, how do those tubes get cleaned? Like, because they're usually bolted to the wall or something, and I'm like, and then people have these weird brushes that they kind of put down these tubes, and I'm like, okay, where does it all go it's just so confusing. But Kendall, what about storing? What'd you say, Jill?
The tubes are long and my arm is bigger than the tube. So I don't see how you can actually clean the whole thing. I mean, maybe it makes you feel better if you stick a brush sort of down there, but you're not really cleaning it.
Yeah. But what about storing it in what is that, pillowcase?
Like a
Can
case?
we do that?
No, I wouldn't even transport it in the case either. I mean, at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of weird things being used to transport the probes around the facilities, pillowcases, tackle boxes. It looks like they got it from a hardware store. But a lot of these probes, especially T probes, they have hundreds of little copper wires running inside them. So when you bend it in less than a 12-inch diameter, you can actually start breaking those copper wires, and you'll start slowly degrading the image quality. You won't even notice. So it's really important to store them, transport them correctly in a device that's specifically made for them. But then also don't store it in the transportation device because again, they should be stored differently than how they're transported. Yeah, it's a lot of odd things you see out there.
Okay, dumb question alert. Do instructions for use in these manufacturers lay this out clearly? Because I've read a lot of instructions for use over the years and they're ambiguous, confusing, and sometimes don't address things. Is it IFUs are vague so the end user sort of does whatever they think is okay? Or are we ignoring them?
I would say they're in their IFUs, but sometimes the IFUs are hundreds of pages long. So trying to, expect people to really comprehend a 200-page IFU and the devil is in the details, that can be really difficult sometimes. I think we could do a better job of, really pulling out the important parts and bits and maybe putting it on posters or putting it in the front or something to say, hey, pay attention to these 10 things of the IFU. Make sure you learn this. But part of it is the medical device manufacturers. They have to put a lot of information in the IFUs, and they can sometimes get onerous and overwhelming for people.
Can I be the devil's advocate here for the manufacturers, though? I mean, who would think that people are going to start transporting in pillowcases, though, right? Like, I mean, I'm creating this device. I'm not going to be like, oh, somebody might use a pillowcase one day, or what's next? They're going to start using stockings, or I don't know, like what it's like
who in their right mind would think that fits into any compliance document, IFU, whatever. I've seen patient belongings bags. Who thought that was going to be written into anything to say, yeah, just grab a patient belongings bag and stick it in there, and that's going to keep blood and body fluid from coming out or keep it from getting damaged? Like, common sense has to be used somewhere along the line.
You would think.
I mean, yeah, I can understand the people going, hey, did you address that pillowcase thing?
Yeah.
No, what are we talking about? But I do, like, I heard you talking about hanging them in plastic tubes, and that seems like it sounds like it's sort of prevalent. And I would say that's a different thing than having it in a Christmas stocking or something. I don't know. I am now going to be paying attention to this everywhere I
go. Don't come up with any new ideas, please, because somebody might be like, oh, that's a great idea. And they're at stores right now. Let's go get
creativity, some. Right? But Tiffany, you see this stuff too? Like, you guys are going to different parts of the country, right?
I do. I myself, as a baby tech, when I didn't know any better, was transporting TE probes in a industrial sterilite tote that was probably way too small, and the cords were touching each other. And I've seen different kinds of cabinets. And on the topic of the IFU thing, I think a lot of the IFUs give general pointers on how they should be transported, making sure that they're not coiled too tightly or being stored in a manner that keeps them protected from environmental contamination. But I think some of those areas are intentionally left vague because they can't address every possible situation in a hospital. There's a plethora of transportation devices pre-made, those cardboard-like carry cases. There's different cabinets. So it's not a one-size-fits-all that's unfortunately can't be captured in an IFU.
I think that's a really good point. They do have to be ambiguous to an extent because of that. It's like, where do you draw the line? And I know that's something I learned a lot about, that it's the more detailed you are in your requirements, in some cases, the harder it is on the end user. And you would think to an extent it would be the opposite, but sometimes it actually makes it harder for the end user. So it's not an easy. I was curious because I've not noticed that. Now I will probably never not notice it.
I think you have two issues with IFUs. They're either too vague or too specific.
Right.
There's rarely an IFU that's like, okay, this is the exact amount of helpfulness that I need to do my job. So we need some help. All right. I'm going to come back to the topic of vendors again. And I'm going to go back to Malinda. How do you feel vendors play a part in sterile storage in our sterile processing areas?
So I think, this is a two-part thing because I feel like your vendors can really help or hurt you with your storage. So in the sense of helping, I think I've had some amazing vendors. I want to be clear, like, not all vendors are horrible and are just, doing the wrong thing just to do the wrong thing. We've all had experience with some, like Mark. No, just kidding. I'm joking, Mark. I think I can work with you, but that have had, we've had to have several talks too. But I've had great vendors who have really helped me outline my storage area to help fix and like line up what I need, not just from the vendor from the shelving company, but also the vendors of the products that I'm trying to store. So those have been really helpful. I've also had times where, again, I've had to re-educate vendors multiple times about the way they take things off the shelf. Because sometimes your vendor has access to your sterile storage. So that comes up to a point. Do you give vendors access to sterile storage? And if they do have access, are they trained on how to properly remove things from the shelf? We've all been in those urgent, crazy situations where we just run and try to get what we need. And in those times, we can put holes in our trays very easily, especially wrap trays, or you can drop something. So I think it's really educating them on their role and their role in preventing issues and errors and how to do things correctly. And then if that doesn't, work, then it comes down to, just kind of saying, you can't touch anything in storage until, somebody's got to be with you or whatever it may be. But, I tend to give them more lenience with helping and until something goes, they prove me wrong in that. But I think it's a two-part, they can be really helpful and unfortunately they can hurt you a lot with that too. Especially extra pieces. That's my favorite. They just throw them on top of trays and items. And
I will tell you that one of the best things anybody did from a sterile processing standpoint to me, I was a newish spine rep and I was doing a lot of cases at a hospital in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, community general osteopathic. And there was an instrument tech, Maggie, who basically said to me one time, she's like, Mark, you don't really know much about sterile processing. And I said, absolutely not. And she said, let me walk you through the process your loaners have to go through before you can use it. And she was awesome, right? So like, I'm sure, Maggie, whatever. And she walked me through it. And I came out of it going, now I understand a lot of this, or at least have an appreciation for it, right? I shouldn't say understanding. And she got out of sterile processing, which was, I felt like she was a credit to the business and one of the first people I really knew who took the time to explain it to people, to reps. And I've often thought that if you want at least let's talk about your orthopedic spine vendors, right? Because they're the ones who are in there a lot. Educating them on this stuff does really help because no one else does. I mean, I'm telling you, the companies do not educate these folks. So you call me and say, hey, Mark, what am I supposed to do with these cannulated spine instruments? No one has ever taught me what to say in those cases. And if you do, I do think it helps considerably. And I've suggested having formal training for people who come into your facilities and do business because, like, for instance, before you let somebody into your sterile storage or give them a passcode or key or whatever it is, they have to go through a course on it. They don't want to. It's your place. I don't think it's unreasonable. And I think more people would like it than you anticipate. So I don't know. Tiffany?
I think there's a lot of places that are trying to figure out if they do want to let vendors have free reign of sterile processing or if they want to have it badge access. And surgeons are the ones tending to push back on the restricting access because they want the reps to be able to go in, get the stuff quickly, not have to wait. But then the SPD staff are trying to say, like, wait, stop. They're just pulling stuff right off the shelf. They're ripping holes in stuff. They're stacking things 5-6 trays deep. So, both sides, I get it. There's a lot to consider when you think, okay, vendors, can you have free reign? Can you not? Or do you have training? I don't know. There's a lot to consider there, but vendors can be super helpful. You're right. Or you have one bad experience and it ruins it for everybody. And that's unfortunate, but that's how it goes with every vendor experience in all facets of healthcare. All right, we're going to have to start wrapping up here. It has flown by, this 30 minutes. So I'm going to go around and ask everyone to give one or two tips that every listener can go and do immediately to improve sterile or clean storage in their facilities, whether it be an audit, whether it be relationship starters, whatever you feel like would be helpful to the listeners. And Malinda, I will start it off with you.
I would say my tip would be to do some rounds. And I don't mean the managers. And I'm not talking about supervisors and leaders. I'm talking about have your tech go through and do rounds and give them a list of hey, I want you to look for dust in bins. I want you to make sure that peel pouches are in a bin and not just laying on a shelf, so they don't get pulled off the shelf when somebody takes something. But, look for certain things. I want you to check a couple peel packs. And this way we're not just correcting the issues in our sterile storage, but we're educating those staff on things that they're supposed to be looking for. We're now empowering them to take ownership of their department and do the right thing and know what they're supposed to be looking for.
It's a great concept of how to do rounds. It's not just walking around with a clipboard, marking things off and sending a report later, but really doing engaging interactive rounds. Really, it sets you up for success down the road. I love that. All right, Kendall, why don't you go next?
I would give a takeaway for people to really look at how, specifically probes are being stored. Are they being stored per the manufacturer's IFUs? They may be long and arduous, or maybe the IFUs are vague sometimes, but really dig into it and look at how it's being stored, because that's typically about one of the last steps before it's going to come in contact with a patient. If it's been stored for too long, if it's been stored improperly, because ultimately no one wants to know that it's from their department or their process, that's where the HAI came from. And that's why the patient got an infection or had to stay longer, or God forbid, something worse happened to the patient. So I would really look and see, how are you storing those probes? How are they stored separately? And how are they being safe?
Yeah, that's great. And one of my favorite things to do is to follow the entire process. You can follow a TEE procedure, follow it to where it's reprocessed, and then follow it all the way back to storage. Or same thing with endocavity probes or instruments. You follow the entire process start to finish. And sometimes you'll find little nuggets that you had no idea were present. Tiffany.
I think one of the things that I tried to integrate for myself in my workflow is anytime that I'm putting a tray or an item on a shelf or taking it off, is look at the shelf it's on, look at the shelf above and below. Is there anything concerning? Is there dust that needs to be handled? Instead of trying to handle the whole storage as one big bite, start by just doing little bits at a time, and you'll notice you start to find things more.
I like that. Advice. Yeah, I like how you broke that into little pieces too, so that it feels manageable. I like that, Tiffany. That's really good.
And we're going to finish up here with Mark.
Well, I would say I can't dive deep on some of these topics like you guys can, but I'll speak on from a perspective of an ortho or spine vendors that are in and out of your building, and regarding, let's say, sterile storage. I think most reps want to do the right thing. They just don't know what it is. So you tend to do the convenient thing. And I think I wouldn't even worry about all the reps. I'd worry about the ones that try to work hard with you and communicate and talk, and grab them and say, hey, can I teach you some of the basic rules of sterile storage on this? And tell me what you learned, what you didn't know, what you did know. And because I think they start to become silent salespeople for you with other reps or their associate reps. And I would use those folks. Like a perfect example is point of care up in the OR. They can be your help up there to make sure something gets thrown in a basin and soaks, or gets sprayed appropriately or disassembled appropriately. Most of them want to do it. And if you can ask them or teach them, look, some of them are pains in the rear ends and always will be, but most of them actually want to help. Use them to your advantage, and I think they will. I know they will, as a matter of fact. And I would just say, think about what's the one thing you wish they all did, and then pick 3 reps you like and say, can I teach you this? And would you help us teach others this? And I think you'd be surprised a lot of them would, because they don't want to be locked out of rooms. They don't want to have to do things. And you'd be helping them. So that's my advice. Sorry if it took a little longer than I'm supposed to.
That was great. All right. That about does it for this episode. Thank you all so much for being here. This was great discussion. And we will see everybody next time for episode number 9.
Okay, so Jill, as usual, whenever I hang out with sterile processing experts, I learn a bunch and I had no clue about, like, as usual. Like, for instance, I didn't know people were hanging peel packs with potato chip clips, I think you called them, like Malinda said. I had no idea. Tiffany brought up, I thought that was really cool about talking about how there's storage, like to think about the storage just above it and just below. And it's sort of like a subtle little thing. It makes you think of and be better at it. And then Kendall, I mean, like that guy, I could listen to him talk all day. I did not realize about the care with which you have to treat these probes and how they can't touch at certain spots. I just, I can't wait to listen to this recording again and learn more. So I just liked listening to those guys, How about you? What'd you take away?
I have to agree with you, Mark. Every time I listen to these podcasts back, I have forgotten everything that we talked about during the podcast. And I always learn something again, and it's my own podcast. So I totally agree with you there. I really liked how Malinda wrapped it up with saying, do your rounds, but not just walking around rounds. Really engage and interact. I think that's so important, especially for the IPs out there. Don't walk in with your clipboard. I always say that. I'm very anti-clipboard. Really teach people as you round so that they can be your auditors when you're not there. And I loved Tiffany, how she said, just doing little bite-sized pieces. That makes it so much more manageable, as you mentioned, Mark. And I also loved the discussion on the little tubes for the TE storage, because that's something that always drove me crazy as an IP. It never seemed right, but I see it everywhere. And so really looking at how you store probes and TE probes really can lead you to a lot of process improvement. This episode was just packed with so many good tidbits of things, and I hope that you guys all enjoyed it too, for those of you who are listening. We will see you next time for episode 9 on Pathogens and PPE podcast. Don't forget to wash your hands and keep fighting dirty.
Thanks for tuning in to this exclusive podcast series on pathogens and PPE. For more information and clinical resources to help you fight dirty, make sure to follow us on social media by searching for Beyond Clean and Transmission Control.